Hello, everybody. So, as we all know, what we see in our monitors or screens when we try to look up close or when we're trying to record what we're seeing with a camera, we're bound to see something like this. Yeah, this sort of interference or disruption to our screen. So, at one point in time, you definitely have seen this before. So, today I'm going to teach you how you can make this basic procedural shader that can help amplify your scenes by adding this realistic certain problem. What we're going to do is we're going to use a simple shader while manipulating or leaving the texture we want to present to our screen as RGB texture. With that said, actually pretty easy to make, and this is how I would. So let's start off with probably opening a new screen. So I'm going to file and a new scene. Right, I'm just going to delete everything by pressing A and then X. All right. Then I'm going to add a plane, but actually, instead of a plane, we can actually make use of the import image as a plane add-on. So I'm just going to go here to my edit and then go to preferences and then here on to add-ons. I'm just going to type in import image. And then you'll see here mine is already enabled. You just need to click on this little box right here and then put a mark on it. And then you just click on refresh and then it's enabled now for you as well. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to use Shift A and then I'm going to go here under image and then select images as planes. And then I'm just going to find the image that I want to use for this little tutorial. So I'm just going to find something here. I'm just going to use the exact same one that I used for my previous scene. So I'm just going to go to material preview so I can see my image. There we go. And I'm just going to rotate it. There we go. All right. So I'm just going to use this one. I'm not going to make a full scene. I'm just going to demonstrate it onto the singular plane right here. So once we've done that, we're actually good to go now. We're just going to go to our shader graph by going to shading here. All right, there we go. Now, as you can see, since this plane already has our picture on it, it already has a material attached to it. So it's just a basic principle, BSDF, and then the image texture is attached to the base color and to the alpha. So I'm just gonna remove all of this. I'm just gonna remove my principal BSDF, and then by pressing X, and then I'm going to add a emission shader. So I'm gonna add this one, and then I'm just going to connect this image texture to my emission, and then I'm going to try to connect it to my material output. And then there we go. So what we have here is when we go to render, actually, let me add a plane first so we can actually see what's happening. Right, actually, I forgot. I got to switch over to cycle so we see the effect right there. So, see, we changed the principal BSDF to an emission shader, so now we have light emitting. Now we can actually just stop there, but as I told you before, we want to add a bit of a realistic look to this one by adding the sort of disruption or like the RGB shader that we see to certain screens when we try to look at it up close. So what we're going to do next is we're going to add a couple more things here. We're going to add another texture. So I'm going to go to Shift A. I'm going to add image texture once again. And then for this one, I'm going to be adding a very specific texture. So with this specific texture, let me just bring this up. All right. So the specific texture that we're going to add is this one. It's a basic RGB color texture. It's a seamless texture. It's literally just the red, green, and blue colors. You can easily find this one on the internet by just typing like, I don't know, RGB test image. You're gonna find something like this one. But if you're a student and a part of my Discord server, I'll be uploading these two textures there for you guys to use. This texture will be the integral part of the shader because it's going to be the one that sells the realism of said shader. So I'm just gonna pick one of these two, maybe. Actually, I'm gonna delete this one. And I'm just going to drag it and drop it onto my scene so it's much quicker. There we go. I'm just gonna use this one. see here. So this one's what I'm going to use. Next up is I'm going to add a couple of nodes starting from now, because the nodes that we're going to add here will basically break down these images and weave them together and basically stitch them up back again into one singular image that we can use to basically showcase the RGB shader. So I'm just going to access this preview so we can have a lot of less load in our computer. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to be adding a couple of nodes. Hang on here. Let me just... My screencast is gone. Okay, there we go. All right, there we go. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to press Shift A again, and then I'm going to type in separate color. Now, if you're using Blender 3.0 or below that, it's going to be separate RGB, but for 3.3, it's now separate color. I believe it was until 3.2 as well. I think it's separate color. I'm not entirely sure, but for 3.3, it's separate color. So I'm going to add two of these separate color. I just duplicate this one by pressing Shift D. All right. So this node will basically break down our image texture into basic RGB data that we can distribute into other nodes as well to basically weave them together. So I'm just going to disconnect this one, and then I'm going to connect my image texture to the first separate color node, as well as my RGB texture. There we go. Next up is we're going to add three specific nodes. It's just one singular node. I'm just going to duplicate it 3 times, because what we have here, since the image texture is now passing through the separate color node or our separate RGB node, what we have here now is the RGB data of said image texture. So what we are going to add is a math node. So I'm going to press Shift A again, and then I'm going to type in math. There we go. And then I'm going to set this one to multiply, because I want it to be like an overlay to each other. It's not one image on top of the other. It's more like they're weaving together. So there we go. So I'm just going to add 3 of these, one for each data here, one for red, one for green, and one for blue. So I'm just going to select this one and then Shift D. I'm going to Shift D again. There we go. So one for red, one for green, and one for blue. So just so that I have a bit of an organization here, I'm going to name this one. I'm going to type in red. This one can be green. Right? Green, and then this one is for blue. All right. So we have a bit of organization here so we don't get lost into our nodes. So what we're going to do is basically just connect 2 and 2 together. So we're going to connect the first red parameter here to this one here, and then red is to red, then green is to green. Oops. Green is to green, and then blue is to blue. There we go. Now, we're basically telling the math node to basically weave the RGB data of these 2 images together to basically make one singular image, but we're not exactly done yet, because we need to tell Blender now to basically compile all these data together into one cohesive node, or to one cohesive data. So I'm just going to press Shift A again, and then I'm going to type in combine color or combine RGB, and then just connect red to red, green to green, and then blue to blue. All right, and then we're basically done with this shader. We're actually done here. So we're just going to connect the combine RGB or the combine color node to the emission shader. There we go. And we're basically done. But wait, there's actually something wrong here, because what we're seeing here is the overall size of the RGB texture. So we want to scale this one down, right? So what we're going to do is basically we're just going to add a basic mapping node to the RGB texture. So I'm going to press Shift A again. I'm going to type in mapping, and I'm also going to add a texture coordinate. There we go. And then I'm just going to connect 2 and 2 together. This for the main texture coordinate, I'm going to connect the UV parameter to the first vector, and then the vector of the mapping node to the vector of my RGB texture. So when that's all said and done, I can type in a higher scale for the X scale, so maybe like 100, and then there we go. We're getting this sort of effect already. So this is where the procedural part comes in here. So we can easily edit out how big the scale of the RGB lines that we're seeing here. There we go. So maybe I could put it onto a 500 to have a more of a, it's like a bigger screen maybe. So yeah, there we go. So 500, I think 500 should be good. Maybe 600. Could try 600. All right, I think that should be good. And let's go back to my render. Actually, as well the emission shader. So it's as you can see, even as trying to zoom in, it's already giving that same effect that you would see in any normal screen. There we go. So we're basically done here. Actually, let me actually alter this one as well to 50, because what we're seeing here, it's not actually part of my image. What we're seeing here, it's actually part of my RGB texture. So what I want is to downsize that as well, maybe set it to 50, so just it's gone. So there we go. It's that easy. Another thing that I want to share as well, instead of, since this sort of monitors or screens, of course we're gonna have to rely sometimes on LEDs now in this day and age. So it's actually a pretty easy one. It's actually a pretty easy edit to do. We're not going to be making use of the RGB texture anymore. We're actually going to be making use of Blender's Voronoi texture. So I'm just going to preview, and then I'm going to add here is Voronoi texture. So I'm going to add it here, and I'm also going to be adding a math node, another math node. It's going to be entirely different for this one, because if we just try and add the color of the Voronoi texture to my separate color node, so we're just going to try and add it there, it's not going to work as it's not going to work correctly. It's going to give it the actual Voronoi fracture, or the Voronoi texture that we're seeing here. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the Voronoi texture pass through a math node by telling it to make it a less than comparison. And then what we're going to do is going to try to lessen this threshold a bit. And then of course, actually, let's add this vector node as well, so we can try to mimic what we want. I'm going to try to, all right, okay. Let me just alter my scale so it looks right. Okay. It's still not that good. So let me just alter this one. Let's see. Oh, wait. It's the wrong part. I inputted the color instead of the distance, because that's the value that we want. No, it's not the color, it's actually the distance. So my bad on my part. There we go. So what we're gonna do next is try to alter it again. Let's see if it's responding correctly now. Okay, still not responding correctly. So, oh wait, actually it's because of this one. I forgot to zero out the randomness and then up my scale to like maybe 1000. Try that. All right, there we go. Now it's functioning correctly. There we go. So here is my current settings for this one. Actually, maybe I'm going to try to maybe bump it up to 1080 maybe? No, maybe 1500. All right, now it looks a bit more realistic for an LED screen. You might want to scale it up a bit. It's going to be completely up to you. And like I said, since this is a procedural shader, you can easily edit this out. All right, so there we go. So it's basically our 2-in-1 shader here. Let me just group this up. This one is going to be for our LED. Yeah, LED. And then this one will be for our RGB. There we go. 2 RGB. There we go. So that is the whole shader. It's basically a 2-in-1 shader now. So we have an RGB and then we have a LED shader. So I have a separate scene rendered for this one. So let me just open it up to showcase to you what else you can do with this basic shader. So I have here is an animated scene that let me play. All right, there we go. So it's basically here. This is basically all in Blender. So we have here, it's just a basic RGB texture, and then I have a simple MOV file playing in my texture. So it's actually a pretty easy thing to do. You just need to change this one, or you're still gonna use an image texture. So I'm just gonna go to image texture. Then if you want to add a video file to it, you can just open it up. Don't worry, the Blender is going to recognize it. It's going to be able to use it. So I'm just going to try and find a video that would work well. So let's maybe this one. All right, this one. And there we go. Go back to material preview and then switch things up. So this one, I'm going to remove this one. I'm going to change it and then change it to this one. Then there we go. So as we see here, when we try to play it, let me go back to my layout. All right, so it's on to 250. So my maximum frames available here is 250. So if I try to play this, let's say set it to 250, it's not going to play it as a whole. So you're going to have to alter your maximum frames in your scene. So let me just click on play, and then you'll see that it's going to be playing. It's not playing. Hang on. It's not playing. Why is it not playing? Because oh, it's auto refresh. I need to turn on auto refresh. I forgot. So I'm just gonna go play, and then there we go. We have the scene here. There we go. So put it on actually material preview. There we go. So my video is playing. So the thing about this one is, like I said, you're gonna have to calculate the amount of frames that you need to apply to your scene to basically, if you want the whole video to play out. So like for example, if your video is running on 30 FPS and it's running on it has a total runtime of 30 seconds, you're probably gonna need 900 frames for it. So you're just gonna type it in here on frames here, and then you're all good to go. It's gonna play out as it should. So I hope this helps. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment down below, and maybe I'll answer it in another video. So until then, see ya.